a concerned community's response to Habonim Dror South Africa's 242 campaign. In order to understand this campaign, we need to take a step back and look at the development and critical change in the ideology of Habonim Dror South Africa. To quote Doron Isaacs and Wayne Sussman in their book Out of the Ashes, A Rebirth of Habonim, on page 30, under the heading A Core Group of Committed Friends, they state, "The members of this group were orphans in that there was no sense of being handed down the torch, so to speak, by the preceding generation. We didn't regard ourselves as following in the footsteps of our madrichim. We didn't use the prior generation of leaders as a reference point. There was a willingness to experiment and to change things. This applied across the board, from ideological issues to movement structures and organizational functioning." Furthermore, Part D, page 34 of the same book, under the heading Moving Forward Ideologically and Cautiously Breaking with the Past, they are quoted as saying, "It was not a rich inheritance of ideology that was bequeathed to us." So what was this new ideology created by these orphaned Habonim leadership? Let's take a closer look. Head of Camp, 1999, Brett Steingo, his legacy to the community, Stop the JNF. Doron Isaacs, senior leader of the movement and co-author of the book Out of the Ashes, The Rebirth of Habonim, his legacy, founder and member of Open Shehuda Street, guest speaker at Israel Apartheid Week 2013, and open supporter of BDS. Ilan Strauss and Daniel McIntosh, both senior leaders of the movement, their legacy, members of Open Shehuda Street, and open supporters of BDS. Habonim continuously denied that the above members have anything to do with Habonim Dror. However, if we take a closer look, this just really isn't true. Doron Isaacs was at camp in 2012 in an official capacity lecturing on the history of Habonim. Isaacs, McIntosh and Strauss were thanked on page 38 of the official camp magazine for 2013 for their continued support. After closed-door meetings with the SAZF, current leadership have created a more politically correct forum to continue with their old narrative. Let's take a closer look at Project 242. There is one common theme throughout the 242 campaign. That is to put the entire blame of the Palestinian-Israeli conflict on Israel. It is to portray Israel as the villain and the aggressor, which oppresses the innocent and vulnerable Palestinian people. The campaign repeatedly blames the occupation and the failure of peace talks on Israel and Israel alone. The first video of the campaign states that military control over another people breeds resistance, hatred, and extremism, while it conveniently forgets to mention that the so-called apartheid wall or security fence was actually a response to hundreds of suicide bombings and terrorist attacks against Israeli civilians, which resulted in the death of hundreds of Israelis and leaving thousands injured, often paralyzed for life. The campaign refuses to condemn or criticize the Palestinian people and their leaders, who still insist that their people commemorate Al-Nakba, translated as the tragedy which the rest of the world refers to as Israel's Independence Day. The campaign portrays Israel as the greedy Jew who refuses to give up land. But does Israel refuse to give up land? Israel, since the very beginning, has been willing to trade land captured in defensive wars for peace, as it eventually did with both the Egyptians and the Jordanians. But neither the Palestinians nor the Syrians have been willing to offer peace in exchange for land, as required by Resolution 242. Resolution 242 of the UN Security Council, which for the first time in history has ordered a nation to return territories lawfully captured in a defensive war. But it only ordered this as part of an overall peace agreement, recognizing Israel's right to live in security. Finally, Israel offered almost all the remaining territory captured from Jordan and Egypt in exchange for peace with the Palestinians. But the Palestinians rejected this offer, both at Camp David and at Taba, as recently as 2000, and instead resorted to increased terrorism against Israeli civilians. The campaign also once again conveniently forgets to mention that the major Arab states, along with the Palestinian leadership, categorically rejected the principles of Resolution 242 in 1967 because it required making peace with Israel, which it adamantly refused to do. At a following summit, Arab leaders issued the notorious 3 no's: no peace with Israel, no negotiations with Israel, and no recognition of Israel. The campaign fails to mention the recent unity government formed by Fatah and Hamas, the Iranian-funded terror organization which was founded in order to liberate Palestine from Israeli occupation and establish an Islamic state in the area that is now known as Israel. However, it is interesting to note that Habonim Dror were the only youth movement whose madrichim did not partake in any way in defending Israel on campus during the annual crusade against the Jews, otherwise known as Israel Apartheid Week. However, they managed to find time 5 days later to partake in a protest on Human Rights Day. They were not too busy for that. Why do Habonim never mention anything morally positive about Israel? Maybe because they are extremists who are only interested in the Palestinian narrative. We call on all parents to no longer be naive and turn a blind eye to Habonim. Take responsibility for your children. There is no one else responsible for their education but